evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here this evening. We've got an exciting event planned around, discussion planned around big data, which will feature a panel, an accomplished panel of women in big data. Our moderator for the evening is Dr. Beverly Wright. Dr. Wright is the Chief Analytics Officer for Aspirent. She's also an executive professor at Georgia Tech, as well as a co-founder of Analytics. And one other thing about Dr. Wright, she was recently recognized as one of 2018's 100 Innovators of the Year for Data and Analytics. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Wright, and we're going to have a good session.
Great. Thank you. Hey, guys. Just quick background on myself, and then I would ask the panelists to please give their background. We're going to have time for Q&A, so as you're thinking of questions, feel free to jot them down. We've got a great bit of experience up here. So we're going to talk about data from the perspective of a bunch of really successful women. So this is not specifically, what's it like to be a woman. It's just what's it like to be in data. And P.S., you're a woman. So that's kind of where we're going with this. So men, women, everybody feel comfortable asking whatever you want to ask. It'll be a little free flowing. So as we go through the questions, they'll jump in as they find applicable. And just as a quick note, they're all expressing their own opinions, just from their own selves and from their own background, not necessarily, representing their companies. So my background, I've been in analytics and data science since 1991. I've been coding in SAS since 1989. Mary and I went in the same doctoral program together. Good to see you, Mary. So my undergrad, decision sciences, before anybody knew what the heck that was, Master of Science in Analytical Methods, and my PhD is in Marketing Science. I've worked at SunTrust. Where else did I work? Oh, Cox, Southern Company. So I worked in industry for about 12 years. I've worked in consulting at advertising agencies, Nielsen, and I'm currently at Aspirent. Thank you for, did you say Aspirent correctly? Thank you, I really appreciate that. I know it's hard to say sometimes. But currently I'm at Aspirent as one of the partners. And I've also spent about 16 years in academia. Do I have a former student in the room by any chance? Okay, good, so nobody's gonna badmouth me, hopefully. I'm a tough cookie, but that's okay. They learn a lot. So I've taught for 5 different universities for about 16 years, teaching master's and doctoral students. And right now I just teach executives at Georgia Tech and Emory. I'm also a data scientist in residence at Georgia State. And as mentioned, I co-founded a nonprofit. So very cool. Very cool life. I have a lot of fun. Jackie, from one of our premier sponsors, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself so we kind of know your background and your experience as you're answering the questions.
Sure, I'm Jackie Barrett. I'm an economist at LinkedIn. I started out my career doing economic research at the Fed. When I graduated, it was 2008 and the start of the financial crisis, so you can imagine we had some huge data issues to tackle. I primarily focused on the mortgage crisis, and so there's a ton of data if you think about the majority of the mortgages in the US, all the origination information, as well as every single month of payment information for those. I also focus a lot on household finances, so you can imagine all the credit cards for one of the large banks, and every single transaction that they did, all the monthly statements, et cetera. And then I spent a couple years in economic consulting where I did expert witness testimony for large damages and antitrust cases, and again, tons and tons of data. To give you an example, for companies that may be merging, you could think that they might be challenging pricing, and so we would have SKU level data for every single retailer by week for both merging companies. Since that, I've made somewhat of a career switch. I've spent the past 2.5 years at LinkedIn, and I'm still kind of in the economics/data science realm, but right now I'm focusing a lot more on labor econ. And we have 575 million members on LinkedIn, And with that, you can think that you get close to real-time sense of what's happening in the labor market. And so very cool to kind of develop some new labor market metrics, and then also partner with NGOs, local governments, in order to give them a really good sense of what's happening in their market. Way more than they might be able to do with government data, which might have lags or may not have quite the granularity that we have. And I'm so excited to be here, so thank you.
Thank you. So you've got a little bit of data, huh? Nice. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cicely Peace-Edouard. My company is called the SimpleVUE. We specialize in data analytics and business intelligence. We have been in business for about 3 years. I have 2 wonderful partners with extensive training in technology and business intelligence. My background is actually in consumer products and marketing, and we have had the wonderful pleasure of doing business with a lot of small companies around the Atlanta area as well as local government. So I look forward to talking to you guys more about our business and how we interact with data.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Cicely.
So I'm Heather Blythe. I'm currently the Regional Director for Advertising Research at Comcast Spotlit. I will be the first to admit that I fell into data. So my background is actually in psychology and philosophy, political science. But I fell in love with research and I really liked statistics, and so I ran with it. But I originally wanted to just be a researcher. So when I started at Cox Media Group, where I became the Director of Analytics and Insights, I ran a team that was responsible for not only all of the social data for our audiences, but the website and app traffic across all those products, and telling a story with that by pulling in other data sources. My current role is a little bit different. So I focus on the advertising side, and my team help tell stories about Comcast customers, our audiences, how they're interacting with our products, and also pulling in any sort of third-party data from Experian or Polk or other places to help bring to life our consumers.
Very cool. And little fun fact to know and tell, Heather and I met at Cox Media Group, and this is our second women-only panel.
The first was in Boston,
Yeah.
very cold.
Yes. Won't do that again.
No,
sorry.
that was poorly planned.
Yeah, sorry about that. Jessica?
So my name is Jessica Agahi, or Howell, as many people still know me. That's my maiden name. I also fell into the industry, and I would say some of that had to do with the fact that I was a bit of a perfectionist. So I wanted to run a business making really good decisions, and if that's kind of your bent, you're going to end up using a lot of data to do that. So through a career in supply chain and logistics and really network analysis, even in the early days, that was an industry that was using a mass amount of data and really trying to get our hands around how to use it well and extract insight. Through some time in finance, internal audit, definitely left some marks on data and internal audit. And now running, so I also ran a big data team on the IT side, and then now in pure technology, running store systems for the Home Depot. As you might imagine, customer order data is something that we very much use to make decisions. So that data lens has translated throughout my career.
Awesome.
Happy to be here.
Miss Shannon.
I'm Shannon Harlow. I'm the Senior Director of Performance Marketing at Equifax. And I've had an interesting career path. I think most people get really, really confused that they see the different roles and companies I've worked at. But I went to school, undergrad, Georgia Tech. I come from a family with a lot of engineering background and focused a lot on decision sciences. And only kind of knew what my family, what's around you, and kind of had a little bit of a panic. And lo and behold, a marketing group kind of adopted me, took me in, and then I was the analytical, I'd create marketing plans with very analytical approach and pricing models and all kinds of different things. So I basically started in marketing analytics before it was really a field, and I think, thankfully, all my career path now makes sense. But I've done everything from, often to get to marketing, you have to understand the macroeconomic factors that impact your business, pricing, product, strategy, competition. And so I've gotten into all those things, often for the search for marketing performance and optimization, and dealt with retail point of sale system data, consumer modeling, customer experience, website data, and I
Beautiful.
Anything that helps optimization, I've enjoyed.
Awesome. And fantastic. We're so fortunate to have all of you. Just for a show of hands, how many of you are working in the marketing field? Not data necessarily, but marketing directly. What about operations? Okay. How about engineering? Okay. And how many of you are in data? Okay. Cool. So there you have it. So the first question we want to ask of you guys is, data's been around for a long time, right? What kind of things are you seeing now that are sort of going forward? What do you see coming in the future? Is it going to be more of the same, or do you see dramatic shifts, and where do you think they're coming from? I promise I gave them these questions in advance.
She totally did. But you just merged two of the questions. So for me, because I've been in different industries, career builder, weather channel, agency, it's fast, furious, and diverse. That's what data is, and you need to expect that. And you can't just kind of hang around and expect people to come to you. You've got to be very proactive in what you're doing. With the Internet of Things, and as that becomes even more prevalent and we have more connected homes, connected cars, everything's talking to everything, the data is going to be pretty wild, which I'm sort of excited about, because I think there's going to be some really cool things that you can do, but also kind of creepy at the same time.
Yes, I would
So
agree.
things real time, meaning fast, like you got to make decisions right away. And when you get an alert on your phone that says, hey, I know you're about to go to the ATM, you should probably use our ATM. It's right next door.
Starbucks has me nailed. They're like, hey, you're by your normal, you just want to go ahead and pull that up.
Might feel a little creepy. And then the types of data you mentioned. Okay.
Yeah.
What other changes are we seeing in data?
Well, I'm seeing the uses of sensors, sound, and video. Those are pretty pronounced, and I'm excited about seeing how we can utilize video in our company to move stuff forward.
Awesome.
I think the accessibility of your customers, the accessibility of data to your customers, I think is a big piece of it. As a retailer, 10 years ago, what data your customers had access to was quite different. So now as we think about how you competitively position, you also have to take into account the fact that your customers are shopping in very different ways than they did before. They're doing a ton more research before they make a purchase. Right. So as a company, being thoughtful of how much data is readily accessible to your customers and how they use that to make decisions, I think is really changing the industry as well.
Yeah, it seems like consumers know more about products that previously were maybe blind, and now they go in and they look at a hammer and they know the dimensions that are optimal. Yeah. Right, because they've looked it up. What other sort of changes? We've got fast, real time, different types, kind of the creepy effects, sensors, IoT, the use of different types of data like video. What else are we seeing?
I'd say two things that I'm seeing. One is that it seems like data is becoming much more cross-disciplinary than it was in the past, where people who probably did not touch data historically have this availability of data that they didn't have in the past, and on top of that, they need to develop these analytical tools in order to analyze it. Yep. And then second, I think that data is actually becoming this competitive advantage to all companies. So every company is now a data company, which wasn't the case in the past.
Great point. There used to, if you think about it, 30 years ago, well, I'm aging myself. Some of y'all don't know 30 years ago you were in diapers. But 30 years ago, it seems like we were getting promotions because of our golden gut. Like you could make a decision without data. And that was how we rewarded senior level leadership in companies. But now, like you said, Jackie, we all have data. We all have access. And in a medium or large size organization in particular, but pretty much any organization, if you're not walking around with at least some rudimentary knowledge of your KPIs, there's kind of not an excuse, right? We all have access to data now. So that's very interesting that the users themselves are changing. What are your thoughts about I'm sorry, Jackie.
No, I was going to add, even at the advanced levels. So if I think about machine learning algorithms, that used to be something that was discussed by PhDs. Now in your base Google package, those are very, very accessible to pretty much any, entry-level data analyst. So the power of that is very different.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I call that the blessing and the curse.
Yeah,
Yes.
certainly.
Because it's great that it's enabled a lot more people to dig into data and become storytellers and analysts, but at the same time, they probably know enough to be dangerous,
Yep.
and having to educate around that and being able to get people the right tools and help them get to the right places.
Right, so that we're not seeing, I'm sure this never happens at your companies, but we don't want to see, senior level executives storm into a meeting and say, we need to be doing some AI, right? They've heard the term, they know that it needs to happen, but they don't know anything about it. So, yeah, I'm sure that never happens anywhere. What do you think about customer expectations? So I'll give you an example. I've been around young people a lot, through teaching and things like that, and I have a 20-year-old and a 19-year-old at home. So what about customer expectations, meaning, do you think that customers at the end of the sales funnel expect companies now to have the full picture of them as a consumer because you have data? I mean, especially Equifax. But what do you guys think about that expectation of customers? Are you seeing more of that at the younger generation?
I was going to say, if you think about it, like you can order a pizza and you can track your pizza all the way to your house. And I think the expectation is if you can do it on that, I think customers expect that you have that level of ability of insight and understanding of what they want and way to communicate with them. And it's just you have these examples of where it's working really, really well, and people kind of have that expectation now that that they will have access to their information that quickly.
Yeah.
I more see the shift on the way they shop. So if I think about from a retail standpoint, 15 years ago, your customer came in to shop an appliance. They were asking kind of gut feel questions like, what stainless steel appliances do you have? What do you think about this brand versus another? They were doing that research experience with a sales associate.
Got it.
Now when they come in, they've done so much prep work that, again, the conversation is more technical. It might be like, which one of these will fit in this exact opening? And I expect you to have an answer to that very technical question right now off the top of your head.
Right.
So the sales experience is really evolving, I think, based on their education. I think there's maybe still a little bit of residual creep factor on the how much do you know about me. I think there's higher sensitivity there for customers than I think we're aware of sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we all live and die by our mobile, it seems, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we as consumers expect kind of like that communication is all happening because it's all on the same device. So how in the world would MyFitnessPal or my Fitbit not know that it's going to rain? Obviously it knows it's going to rain because my weather app is on there too. So I think the consumers are thinking like, oh, well, it's all on the same device. They should be talking to each other. And just that expectation, is there, it seems like with data for companies. So it kind of puts a little bit of pressure, but maybe in a good way. Sort of a blessing and a curse thing again. You guys have all worked in data for quite a while. What do you think were some of the biggest barriers to entry, either then, or what do you think they might be now, and how the heck can we overcome them? Some of the people here tonight are probably interested in careers in data. So what would you say about the barriers? Yeah, you're on. Okay.
I'm speaking probably not just for data, but anytime somebody's making a career switch, I think just the way the incentives are aligned for both employers and recruiters, they want to hire somebody who's known to them. So somebody who maybe already has a proven background in data or looks like everybody that they've already previously hired, because it's safer and it's really costly to hire somebody and make the wrong decision. And so I think for everybody, there kind of is this difficulty in moving into a new field. That being said, though, I do think that once you leverage your network, or there are tons of things that you could do on social media, such as, at least on LinkedIn, if you are aware of the keywords that you're putting on your profile, it makes a difference because recruiters are searching for those things, and just like having more of a presence puts you at top of mind to your network and to recruiters. So keeping those things in mind when you're making a career switch is important.
So think about how the AI is operating behind the scenes. Okay.
I just went very meta there. Just to add to that, if you look for the data analyst or data scientist, you start searching for jobs like that, they're everywhere. I think that was the one thing that surprised me when I started to get more into this, that it wasn't just, oh, in marketing, there's finance analytics, there's HR analytics, there's customer analytics, there's all these different pieces, and now they're starting to talk to one another. So don't limit yourself. Again, I came from I was going to be a therapist, and this is where I'm at. I'm still a therapist, I think, sometimes.
I was going to say, you can be a therapist for me a lot
some
of
people
times.
just walk right in and they're like, I need to. Yeah, you just got to breathe a little bit, because sometimes the data might not help you out like you want it to. Right. So don't be afraid to kind of look and be outside. If you are a career switcher, do leverage your network and connect and make those meaningful relationships. And there is something to be said to any hiring manager when they look and they see that you're self-taught, that you're teaching yourself things, that you've re-enrolled in school, or you're getting additional certifications, or that speaks volumes to me, because that tells me that you really want this.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's one of the criteria, or at least preferences, that we have at Aspirent is we want people to be constant learners. If you go into a dynamic field like this and you're not interested in learning more, then it's going to be problematic. I mean, it changes so quickly. So that's a great point.
Well, I wanted to add, if you don't find what you want, start your own business. I completely. There are the field is so vast that you can. So definitely, there's so many opportunities, and I think for anyone that's thinking about it, start your own business. We can hang, partner, do all that stuff. Yes, not to mention
You'll
being
love
your
the
boss.
Nice. Any other barriers you wanted to mention about what you think are kind of limitations to getting into the data field?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges is the field is so broad and so deep that some people find it intimidating or like scary to start. And the reality is, like, just start somewhere. Find like one little thing you're interested in, learn one. It's not, I think a lot of people, it becomes so overwhelming. You're like, I'm going to have to learn all these tools and concepts and a little bit of IT and a little bit of statistics and a little bit of this. There's opportunities to specialize, and there's opportunities to be broad, and likely you'll have to do a bit of both. But if you start somewhere, a lot of those foundational building blocks do kind of transfer and make it easier whichever way you go. So I say just don't let it be intimidating, because I think when you just kind of start small, start in one place, you'll realize you get comfortable, and the other stuff will kind of come faster. Like, don't let all the scary terms, stop you.
Yeah.
From
That's great advice. That's great, because it can probably seem very intimidating from the outside, whereas we've sort of grown into it and seen it. It's sort of like adopting a teenager instead of seeing it grow up. Yes, I said it. I know we're live streaming. Sorry, Alexandra and Adam. So what would you say is the most exciting thing? Because I can hear the enthusiasm in y'all's voice as just you're responding to some of the other questions that we're asking. But what would you say is the most exciting thing about working in the data field?
I think for me anyways, it's the constant environment of problem solving. So I like that I feel like I'm in a think tank sometimes. Like, I enjoy that. Somebody gave me some career advice many, many years ago, and it's something that has resonated in my head since. Work with the smartest people you can find, and sink your time into a company that will take risks on you. And both of those two things I've tried to hold really steadfast to, and those have landed me in this space where there's always that next problem to solve. So there's never boredom, and you're always learning because you're surrounded by just very bright folks.
Nice.
I would say you never know what you're going to get. Opportunity shows up at the most unexpected times. Again, I fell into my role, but I've on this panel because of what I've done. And the people, it's fantastic because you meet really smart people that are just so scientific minded, and then you meet great people that are very high level and strategic and bringing all of that together. It's been fantastic. So I think it's really just, that's one of the things I love about it, is the people and being able to put things together and bring people together to solve problems, because I'm all about some puzzles.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I kind of think of data as being creative, and logic all together as one, blended as one. So it's kind of exciting for me to sit in front of a customer and hear about their organization and their problem, and then my team and I get a chance to solve that problem. So it's just like, and I get to sit back in front of them and tell them the story of their data and their customer, and I think it's exciting.
Awesome. I think I love that you said art too, because I've always thought it should be called data, arts, and sciences instead of just data sciences. That there's definitely an art side to it. So
I agree.
yeah, interesting. Any other thoughts on the exciting world of data?
For me, one of the exciting things is just how pervasive data is becoming and how the willingness to adopt novel data sets has changed. To give you an example, at LinkedIn, we have some partners, including the World Economic Forum and the World Bank. And you think of these as kind of being slow-moving, conservative organizations, but they are starting to realize in order to keep up with trends that are moving very, very quickly, that it is important to adopt these novel data sources. So that's refreshing to me and exciting.
Yeah, constant evolving. For me, I think it's the discovery. I think that ties into what you were talking about, Jessica, with the problem solving and the storytelling that goes with that, Cicely. But the discovery, like there's just to think that there's information and insights that are buried within numbers. And I just love being able to find those. That to me, it's just like, I get a thrill out of that. And the other thing is, one of y'all alluded to it earlier, that there's sort of multiple roles mixed into every data role. If I had had my choice, I would have probably specialized in a specific role, like marketing science as opposed to just data science, but now there's so many different roles. At the time, I was like, utility, okay, I'll take it. Cable, okay, I'll take it. Banking, okay, I'll take it, because there weren't that many roles. Now everybody's trying to hire a data scientist, right? So you could really get picky now, and you can say, I'm only going to work in the financial services, and so go work at Equifax or somewhere, like that. But back then, we didn't have that, so it's kind of interesting. Do we have anybody from healthcare that works in data science? Yeah, see, very specialized field, and you guys are hiring too, I bet. Yeah, from Anthem. So there's a way to layer in multiple roles, so you're not just in data, but you're in data within a certain vertical, and it makes it kind of exciting to be in both. Very cool. Before we get to Q&A, I have one last question for you guys. What would you say to a middle or a high school student, and in particular, since we are women in wireless tonight, girls who might feel a little hesitant about pursuing a data career? You touched on it just a tad, Shannon. I love that piece of advice you gave. But what would you say to a child, who's maybe in a STEM program or who isn't, and they're thinking like, gosh, data's so cool, I really want to be a part of that, but I'm not quite sure. What would you say to them? Would you tell them to run? Run now, kid.
Starting.
So I have a 5-year-old, so fair warning that some of my examples, he comes to mind immediately. So with my 5-year-old, it's decisions, right? How do you make decisions? So I think about, even when I start coaching middle, high school, college students, it's how do you think about making decisions? What field are you interested in? Because regardless of the field of interest, there is going to be a decision set that has to be made, right? And regardless of whether you actively choose to go into data, you're going to deal with data. So the question is, what kind of decisions do you want to make? What field do you want to be in? And how does data become a means to make a great decision? So I think I tend to talk more about the field as a thread through others. Although there are folks that decide that pure data science is the career for them, irrespective of field, and you see them in consulting roles, et cetera. But I more think about, hey, what field are you interested in, and how does data become kind of a thread through that field?
Yeah, because it's really not a field that doesn't have some sort of data involved in it. And it's really at the heart of it is the decision making. What else would you guys say to these poor kids?
Well, I guess I would tell them, I still think the basis of all of this is to have a good STEM background. So pay attention in your math class, take some AP classes, and in addition to that, I tell them to be good listeners, ask a lot of questions, and allow yourself to be creative. I think that is the basis of how you're going to be able to be successful in the industry.
Love it. Thank you.
I would add to that and just say that if you're in a data role, it usually isn't just strictly running algorithms. There's a lot of other things that go into it for you to be successful, such as like listening, like she mentioned, but also presentation skills, trying to think about how to translate what you're doing to different audiences who might vary in terms of their how technical their background is. And so maybe to think about it like holistically rather than just the numbers piece.
That's fantastic advice. Even at the college level, I see some students all the time that are just so, and I used to be this way, so I'm admitting it, so focused on the model that they sort of lose sight of the entire forest. So I remember, I'm not going to say which company, but I worked for this company and I love this company. It was probably my favorite gig of all time. And that says a lot because I'm old. And I had this one model and I loved it so much. Like, do you ever feel passion toward a model? Like, I hated deleting some model. Like, that's so weird to hate code. Okay, never mind. I'm being really weird. But I loved this model and I kept like trying to improve it. And I was basically doing like manual machine learning back in the day. So let me improve it. Let me change this variable. Let me try that. Let me try it this way. And I kept iterating and the project was over, by the way. Like, we had already delivered results and I kept iterating on this model because I wanted to improve it and I just wanted to make the diagnostics better and see what I could do with it. So for me, it was about that, and I totally lost sight, Jackie, of what you're talking about, that there's so much more to it, that it's not just about building models, it's the whole cycle. It's how is it going to be used? How do you frame it up front? How's a decision going to be made that's going to be supported by this thing? So absolutely great advice for any child or really anybody looking at a career in data, is to think about the whole picture, not just this one piece. Fantastic.
Yes. So I'll add my little pieces here. I've got 3 kids, and these are the things that I tell them. There are billions of people in the world. You're not going to like everybody, and everybody's not going to like you. Don't let someone that doesn't like you or you don't like stop you. Like, if you want to be in data, find those people, connect, find a mentor, have those conversations. So when you had those decisions and you're like, this is the industry I want to go in, find someone, reach out to them. You'll be very surprised at the people that will respond. And the last piece is, there is nothing wrong with being self-taught. There's nothing wrong with constantly learning, and there's free resources out there where you can do so much. There's open source data analysis. There's so much out there. Just go for it. Like, don't be afraid. Just do it.
Awesome.
That's kind of a beautiful secret that's different now, right? Like, you can try before you buy now, right?
Yeah.
Like, when I was deciding on an undergrad, it was like you were looking at a list of things on paper and going eeny, meeny, miny, mo, right? Now you can absorb free resources, understand whether this is the right fit for you. Do you enjoy it? Do you not? Before you make heavier investments. So that's another piece of the coaching, is if you're not really sure, there's a ton of free resources that you could leverage to get a sense of whether or not this is something you might enjoy longer term.
Yeah.
And maybe, like, I think for middle and high school students, like, a lot of times people talk about, like, oh, all the awesome things your job or where you're at now, but, like, career is gonna be a journey. You're gonna have to like getting there. So if you really don't like something, it's like, and you're gonna be spending your time there, you gotta really figure out where's that blend of like where your talents are and your interests, and likely even in data, there's a little bit of something for everybody. But how you're gonna actually, what is that day-to-day gonna be like?
Yeah.
Because it could be that your project takes a year to get an answer. There's places where you're in retail and you're answering questions every day, and just knowing, what you want to do along with it.
Love it.
Jackie, I'm going to tee you up.
We will now start Q&A. Brenda.
That's such great info.
Yeah, Brendan's referring to, if you're a premium member, then you've access to LinkedIn Learning, and there are tons of courses on there, everything from how to influence people to basics in R or Python. So there's a wide breadth of courses.
Awesome. The last comment I was going to make before we start Q&A, so definitely start thinking, give me 1 second, I promise, is there's, y'all probably, how many of you have seen me speak before or been on something? Okay. So I kind of travel around and do all these different little things, and because I'm a very strong advocate for data and data science, and I just really believe in it, and to be frank with you, I'm really glad there's other people I can talk to now about it, because I started before it was a thing, and so now I'm like, oh, colleagues, thank goodness. And there's this kid, and he kind of follows me around. I'm like, who's this kid? He's like 16 years old, and his dad's always with him. he's a high schooler. He's interested in data, and he comes to these events. So I think it is going, it's getting into the earlier ages. I also have a very good friend that I've known since high school, maybe middle. No, I think it was high school. I don't know. I'm so old. And she is responsible for ASP, after school program. And they just started STEM content within her after school program. So they have like robotics in this school. And so I will be speaking at an elementary school for the first time ever because kids are now interested in data and data science at the elementary level.
Yes.
So guys, these are kind of good times. This is a really exciting time to be in data, whether you fell in through a psychology degree or whether you deliberately pathed yourself or whether you started your own company because you're like, I want to do it this way and I love my boss. It's a great time to be in data and data science. So you guys are in a great spot. Question. And allow me to answer the question, or allow me to restate your question before we get an answer. And also one other thing is I prefer that when you ask a question, it's just a question to the panel. So try not to pick on anybody in particular. Yes?
Is a comment allowed?
Sure.
So I was just
Depends on what it is.
Great info.
Great. Cobb County, DeKalb County, free resources available through libraries. Great. Yes, ma'am. We know where you're going, and they're dying to answer you. Yeah. So let me restate the question. The comment is about you've got these people that are really good at creating solutions or analytical solutions and getting insights, but then there's a stumble on the communication side. So what would you guys say to that one?
Well, I just want to make a comment. Were you at our panel that we did in
I know,
Boston?
exactly what we
Because
talked
that's very much.
Yep. Still
Yeah,
here.
so they call them unicorns. I believe that you can create your own unicorns and not a bad way. It's tough, but you can coach people or you can pair them up. So my former team at Cox Media Group, I had some people that were really, really strong in the data analysis part, but they weren't very strong on the visualization and presenting. And so I had them work with someone that was strong in that so they could learn from one another. And all it's going to come down to is a lot of practice and asking a lot of questions. There is not a dumb question unless you've asked it 4 times and I'm giving you the 4, that's dumb. But there's something to be said for just practicing a lot, and you can get there. Those are skills that you can learn, in my opinion. I've seen it happen.
I think the one thing I see people miss is messaging. So if you think about it, when you extract data and you're doing your analysis, that data should be telling you some message. You're going to get to a conclusion at the end of that analysis, right? And I think what I see sometimes is people will start the visualization before they've done enough analysis on the data or building the model and really extracting the insight. They start building the visualization too early and they end up just landing everything on the visualization. And what you got to remember is that visualization should be telling the message that you garnered out of your data analysis. So I think just being methodical about your thought process and how you approach the build of the visualization is step one. Second piece is try to remember your audience. And so I think all of us immediately lean towards our microphone when you ask that question because we all have dealt with this in some capacity. And we see people be highly successful that can both message and then understand their audience and deliver that message in a way that the audience can interpret. Many times on these heavy data analysis, especially intense algorithms, if I think about, as a retailer, we deal with shrink a good bit, discussion of shrink. So predictive models are very, very common in my field. Your business partner that you're delivering that message to may or may not have come at that problem from the same angle. They may not have looked at data the way that you're looking at it. So you also have to remember who's listening to your message and try to approach the way you pitch it and explain it based on the lens that they're coming at the problem through.
I'd say a couple roles ago, I had the fortune of working with a group that we kind of ran little steering committees for stuff. Mm-hmm. We brought together somebody who was really good at the business, somebody who was really good at the analysis, someone who was really good at the storytelling, and that team was kind of involved, not just even at the end, it was even in the beginning and some of the hypothesis gathering and what people thought was going on. And I still think some of where I see the kind of team sport approach, I mean, to your point, it's amazing. When you find the talent who can do it all, people are going to want them, they're going to get a lot of work. And then I think in the other teams, it's partnering and figuring out how to bring each other together.
Yeah, and if I do the math on all the students I've met and the new talent and the jobs I've had and all that kind of stuff, I probably met at least, I would say 1,000 data scientists, and I probably know 6 that are unicorns. So I try to tell people, think about the unicorn as a department or as a group, not an individual, because that is a very tricky thing, right? It's kind of rare. Yes. So how is data used to give your company a competitive advantage in the marketplace?
That's a tricky one because I'm only 8 months into my new role, so I'm still learning a few things. But ultimately, it comes down to, I think I know you touched on it as well, is you're getting real-time feedback from consumers. They're posting on social media, they're ranting on Yelp, so there's so many different contact points that you can have and being able to ingest those. So finding the right tools to be able to run sort of that real-time semantic analysis first, and also looking at what your competitors are doing. The thing with a lot of what I do in my current role and my previous role is that it was very local, and there's a lot of data, but it's not when you start putting a lot of lenses on things, especially in media. So you sort of have to start triangulating as much as you can to find out. I mean, you can get some things from competitors, but a lot of stuff is very behind closed doors, hidden. And so at the end of the day, what I've pushed my team and what I try to do is not talk about our competitors and tell the story of what we are, what we're doing, and how we're changing to meet the demands of our consumers, but also how we're changing to push forward how we think about advertising and how we do that, how we deliver advertising.
Yeah, I mean, if you come back to like retail fundamentally as a business, right? There's kind of your top line sales, which the way I look at that is if a customer is happy and you have the right product at the right price, they're going to be back again. So top line sales, we look at those 3 things to drive that. And then from an expense side, there's a variety of things we looked at. I mentioned kind of predictive modeling in the shrink space, but the reality is I would echo the sentiment on we're trying to listen to our customers. And there's lots of ways that you do that, right? What are frustration points coming through call center data? What lines of business tend to have the highest call volume? What elements impact the customer experience when they step into the store? As example, I know that for Home Depot, my customers that purchase something online and are going to pick it up in store, they want to get in and they want to get out. So analyzing the business and the operation through that lens of, every increment from the moment you step foot in the store, how much time does it take? Down to the way in my area we design selling systems, or the systems that you would have to, an associate would have to process you through to pick up an order. Every single click we count, because I know that click is at least another full second that customer has to wait. So I think using the data at a top line to analyze the customer experience and where their pain points are. And then once you find the pain point, it's another layer of data analysis to say, what are my options to fix that pain point?
What are some of the top roles that you guys see in data, and what kind of skill sets are particularly desirable? I did talk a little bit about the learning aspect. I want people to want to learn. They can't just say like, oh, I'm done with my degree, I'm done with my certification, here I am. You got to continuously learn. And we talked a little about the unicorn, being able to communicate, yet also be able to build good models or manage data well. Got it. So what's your top 2 or 3, must-haves for data positions?
It's now when I get to say I'm hiring like crazy, so if anyone's looking, please let me know.
Yeah.
Literally, Home Depot's hiring 1,000 new associates just in the IT space, and a ton of those need heavy data background. So there's my plug, and then I'll answer your question. I think the days where you have to be a unicorn are gone. I think you've got enough engineers in the space that can bridge the gap to a degree to where if you're someone who can tell a great story and can help lend a lens on messaging, you can pair with an engineer and we can bridge the gap. So I don't sweat that as much as we did maybe 10 years ago, to your point. But tools, I mean, Tableau is heavy still in the field, and it's not the best from a stat standpoint, but it bridges the gap on most business problems. And then the back end varies by company so radically. But figuring out which side of the equation you're most comfortable. Are you most comfortable constructing the models and being deep in the data extraction, building programs? Or are you more comfortable really extracting insight once the data is kind of landed, and messaging and storytelling with interacting with business units? Figuring out what's your strongest suit and go that direction would be my recommendation if you were asking.
Yeah, and I mean, wasn't that long ago that the reason you kind of had to be a unicorn was there's only one position.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay.
Nobody had budget for anything else.
Yeah, we're going to hire this one guy. He better be able to do everything, you know, in data science. But now there's, 12 people in the department or even more. And so you've got different subspecializations. So it probably depends on which side you want to go to. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so let me rephrase it just a tad. I'm going to have to reposition it because we don't want to have to get trade secrets or anything specific to their companies. But where do you see companies going as a reaction to the new regulatory and privacy concerns that we have coming similar to GDPR? Like, what kind of changes would you expect to see?
I can't speak broadly, but at least for LinkedIn, we were always members first. And that was one of our main tenets. And so hopefully the creepiness factor was not there. And GDPR is kind of an extension of that. So in our view, it's not really changing anything.
Yeah, I feel like companies generally are landing on one or other side of the aisle from a theological standpoint. You're either in the opt-in school or the opt-out. And I think you're just seeing kind of that culture across companies. They kind of tend to land on one side or the other is more what I'm seeing. But I think all of us are highly sensitive to what a consumer is comfortable with and what's going to make you feel better about the brand versus make you really concerned, right? Nobody wants to feel like you're collecting a whole bunch of data that I don't know about and that you're going to use in some nefarious way. So I think all of us generally, especially in the retail space, are being somewhat cautious on, what's comfortable to you as a consumer.
Yeah, and I mean, as a consultant in this space, I see, dozens of companies all the time. Like in every month, I probably interact with at least a dozen companies. And I would say the sensitivity is very high right now. So I think as a general rule, even small companies are just being extremely cognizant and deliberate about how they manage data from end users. I would imagine big companies are doing the same kind of thing. So I think it could be a game changer, but time will tell us probably more.
I would say this is when legal has a seat at the data table.
Yep.
So your legal team is going to be your best friend, and the more you can help educate them now, the better that's going to be in the long run.
Yep, great point. Yes, ma'am. Girl, you want to clean data? We're all going to want that. Ain't nobody like cleaning data. Okay, so, no, appreciate that very much, and I'm not kidding, man. So the question was around, who's cleaning the data? Like, is there a niche specifically toward that area? Because we've talked a lot about predictive analytics and different types of models, but how are we getting to that model-ready data set? Which to me, by the way, is what I dream about. Model-ready data sets.
Late nights with Dr. Beverly Wright.
That's right. That's right. Full transparency. Who's your janitor?
I usually like the analyst that's doing the model, but then also, again, that partnering aspect, just to kind of say, hey, does this look right? Because they're going to be able to speak better to things, and that they're going to know what they cleaned, what they changed. They're going to keep all of that history, and there's something to be said about having that context if certain questions come up. So I'm just start to finish, let's make sure the same people are touching it. but have those conversations just to make sure that you're doing those gut checks, or like, hey, does this make sense?
Yeah, I'd say it probably depends on the size of your teams. Because if you got thousands and thousands of people, you're likely going to have some more specialized roles, and then you're going to have some roles that you're always still going to have to touch it to some extent. Yeah. But yeah, but I think you have everything in between. So I think there's plenty of companies that have people who specialize it, and a lot of people that are still having to touch it no matter what, and some people who are having to do all of it.
Yeah. Jackie, we got something?
Oh, I mean, I think Shannon got it, but just LinkedIn at least, or some of these bigger internet companies, they have entire teams that are just dedicated to cleaning data and standardizing things so that you can easily aggregate things or know if one thing is similar to another.
Well, and don't look at cleaning as okay, it's clean, now go model it. Because once you start modeling it and playing in it, you realize, oh, this is not how I wanted it, or I need to create this metric, or I need to do this thing. Like, it ain't never clean. So kind of like the bottom of your feet ain't never clean. So I'm just kidding. Are we still recording? More advice from
I was going to say,
Dr.
to your
Beverly.
point, there's actually jobs that are called data wranglers,
Yes.
and there's like all this stuff, and sometimes people like laugh when you hear them. You're like, no, these are careers now.
Yes, you can make a full career out of just that. I know my people are not fans, like especially because the people I hire are modelers, right? And they're not a fan of having to clean. But one of the things that I like about it, and I think you were talking about, Heather, is that having to do that, you get frustrated, but you learn so much about the data, and I think that helps you become a better modeler too. So even though it can be kind of irritating sometimes, it will probably help you to really have to scrub through it. Mm-hmm. Next question, yes ma'am. Yep, great. There's I'm trying to think of his name, Alberto something, Visual Trumpery. Have you guys seen him? Mm-hmm. Maybe take a look at him. I think he's written some books on it. But what are your thoughts on the production of publicly available, say, statistics or visualizations that come across the wrong way? This sort of ties into an ethics question a little bit. But what are your thoughts on what you're seeing in that area?
I think you see more people asking better questions, right? Like you could, I'm not going to speak about unemployment, but just in general, you could ask somebody what, you see quotes on, like, let's say it's, I'm trying not to use an exact example, but you see numbers out in the press, and you start to see people now asking, how did they get there?
Yep.
Because how you get there can change that number drastically. And I think if you've been in model building, you know you had to make assumptions at different points. And it used to be some people would just kind of take it. Oh, there's a number, I'm using data. And a lot of times it was like fitting a piece of data they wanted in, to support the case. And now people are asking, like, well, how did they get it? What went into that? How was it formulated? And that is where I think you start to get like a really better understanding of, is this something with a big lag time where it may not be as more meaningful for whatever decision you're making? And is there a better, more available data set if you need something that's today's point in time versus maybe what we were 6 months ago? And I just see people in the public asking better questions, and I think it makes us all in the field stronger and
Shannon,
more informed.
Can I draw a parallel, and you can tell me if it's on target or not, in that when you used to buy a car, you had no idea where that car had been and what it's been through or anything like that. But now with all the different services that are available, you have a little bit more insight into it. It sounds like what you're saying is that consumers know what to look for now. And by consumers, I'm talking about people that are consuming the visual or consuming the statistic. And it seems like we're questioning more just as a general public. Did you say that makes sense?
Yep.
Well, there's also, we've talked about this before in this panel, the data are readily available. If you have the gumption, you can dig into a lot of those data sets because they're made publicly available. And it's right there at your fingertips. You just have to go to a website now. It's not where you would have to go probably to the library or whatever back in the day. And then Beverly, I'm going to steal something from you, but I really like citizen analyst.
Yeah.
That's my favorite term.
Mm-hmm.
And
Explain to the people what we mean.
It's just ordinary people that really like data, and they are, it may not even be their day job, but they're digging in and they're bringing to light certain information from those publicly available data sets. And it can come in different forms. It could be information about the employment rates, or it could be information about a certain company and what they're producing and how they're producing things. I find that fascinating, and you can often see a lot of that stuff, and this is not a plug. Tableau did not pay me to say this, but I love looking at the Tableau public and the visualizations of the day and the different stories that you can see there and the interactivity you can have and just all the different data sets that people tap into to help change the world.
Yeah,
for the
you
better.
question it, it's out there. You can probably find it. Let's move to the next. Yes, ma'am. Got it. So this is, you probably didn't realize at that time you asked, but this is a question that may garner some emotional response because there's kind of a translator, and some people feel very strongly there should be translators, and other people feel very strongly there should never be a translator. So what you're talking about is actually the Analytics Translator. So the notion is, or the question is about, there are certain people that kind of really know data and really understand the mechanics and that sort of thing. And then there are other people that create the analytics and the modeling and the data science behind it. And they're not always, they don't know how to communicate necessarily with each other. So should there, I guess you didn't really ask it this way, but should there be kind of like this person that sort of hands between? Or talk to us about that function, whether it's a role or not. Uh-oh, the glasses came off. About to get real. I know.
You know, this is tough. This is a tough question. I personally think a translator would be helpful. So I think that would be something that you should really think about pursuing. In our company, we deal with much smaller projects, so we have someone that manages that whole process. But when I was in my former life, we would have died for having someone to translate that type of, using that type of role. So I think you should pursue that. Yeah, that's me.
I mean, I had a very small team, and I still have a small team, and I became the data translator for a while, and I think sometimes you can create that as you get more familiar with the business, how it operates, the lingo, and just how people function and work, and so you naturally evolve into that. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how I mean, you will become a data translator, there's no doubt.
Yeah, I was almost going to pose a question to the panel. Those of us who know people in data translator roles, how did they get there? And I don't know, I mean, the ones I know started in one place or another, right? They were in the business, or they were in IT, or they were on the data modeling side, and then they did really good job of communicating with all the other groups they worked with, and they kind of carved out a new role, and many times it didn't even exist. People just saw that, like, they brought everything together and you wanted them involved. Yeah. I don't know, from your perspective, are you starting to see some of those roles more where somebody can start in that, or are you still seeing where it's a path to get there?
I feel
like if you search LinkedIn, would you find a translator role?
Jackie, help us out, please.
Oh, I've almost wondered what's meant by that. Because when I think about a data translator, I almost think of a product manager type who's communicating with people in the business, who's also communicating with the engineers, trying to refine what customers want, what's technically feasible. So, I mean, maybe it has a lot of different titles depending on the industry that you're in.
Well, and generally there's, you mentioned engineer and data science, but it's usually kind of seen as three groups. There's IT, there's the analytics / data science, and then there's the business, different functional areas. And the communication that has to happen between the three of them with, IT hopefully creating the architectures and throwing the data over the fence, and data science doing something with it, and hopefully the business actually learning from it and implementing solutions. So it's kind of tricky to give a different perspective. Some people feel very strongly that there should not be a translator unless you sort of evolved from, but to take someone brand new and stick them in the middle, it's sort of, for the data scientists, it might relieve them because they're like, oh, I don't want to have to go tell the business my model is beautiful and perfect and they should just get it, But some people believe too that as a data scientist, you have a responsibility for understanding how this is going to get applied. And so that's where that emotional sort of charge, I guess, comes from, is just sticking that person in the middle. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Okay, we have time for, what does that say?
Time is up.
Time? Oh, time's up. We have no time. We have no more time. Thanks you guys again for being such a great audience. And thanks again to our panelists for their service to the profession. And again, I just want to say we're in really a great state right now. When I started a long time ago, there were very few people involved. We were answering very simple questions. Really, now we're answering such complex questions. Our data is so rich, it's so plentiful, it's real time, it's got velocity behind it, and it's being used to really pivot strategic decision making. So these are really good times for us to be in data. I'm excited about this field. I hope you guys are as well. Please hang out and talk to our panelists, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed our session. We're here the second Thursday of every month. Next week is supply chain at Atlanta Tech Village. I hope you'll join us. You can register at wirelesstechnologyforum.org. Please come back next month. Y'all were the bomb. You all were fabulous. Were they not? I mean, I feel like I have NASA big data women here. I do. I mean, seriously, y'all are amazing. Thank you so much. Please come back anytime and consider joining our organization or participating in it for future events. We would love to have you. Again, are they fabulous? And more importantly, look around. Oh, it's all women. How about that? Isn't that a different networking event? Please come back and join us. We would love to have you. You're all awesome.